week since primary school pupils returned to school across the country. The Department of Basic Education says it hopes that schools will not be forced to close once again due to COVID-19, as the impact of that will be devastating. The schools opened at the back of disturbing incidents of looting and vandalism of buildings as well as vehicles. To talk more on this, we're joined by the Basic Education Department's spokesperson, Mr. Elijah Mhlanga. Very good to be with you tonight, Mr. Mhlanga. Perhaps let's talk about some of the challenges that you've experienced now that the pupils are all back at schools. You have asked that the social distance be reduced, for example, from 1 meter to half a meter between the students. Tell us the reasons why this request has been made.
Good evening, Tammy. Well, the request has not yet been made. Yes, it is out there in the public, but it has not yet been put together. It's a thought that the department has that should be considered. Remember, even the return of all primary schools back to school, as we have seen this week, is something that was discussed and finalized in May already. And it was scheduled to happen in July because we needed time in between. So even this particular proposal, when it gets to be made, it is being made for consideration in the future, because as a department, as a sector, we need to continue to make proposals that we feel need to be put in place to try and normalize education because of the learning losses and other losses that the sector has suffered thus far.
And why was it important to you to have this thought? Why this particular measure?
Well, for many reasons. When we look educationally at what has taken place since March last year, the losses are more than what we are aware of. Every research that comes through does indicate that learners are dropping out of the schooling system. Initially, earlier this year, we were told that some 1.2 million children did not return to the schooling system since the forced closure of schools due to COVID-19 in March last year. And 4 weeks ago or so, there was another research which came out to say that an additional 500,000 learners have not been in school this year alone. That means with every day that learners are not in school, they get bored, lose interest, and they don't come back to school for whatever reason. We know that it's not just the learners themselves, but the rotational system is also affecting families, because in the days when learners are not in school, it means that somebody must be there at home to look after the children. Not only that, for the days that they are not in school, it means that someone needs to be assisting the children with the homework or the projects that they would have been given. Remember.
Sorry, Mr. Mhlanga, if I can just come in here for a moment. Are you asking for this distance between learners to be reduced so that you can, quote unquote, legally be able to have more children in the classroom?
We already have that. What we are experiencing right now is a situation where the 1 meter social distance as gazetted is difficult to comply with, because even though the department said learners must come back to school using what we call the risk-adjusted differentiated strategy, we are seeing parents releasing their children in large numbers back to school, which then presents a problem to schools. Many schools we monitored this week, the school principals and teachers are saying, we did not say to parents that they must release their children. We said because we are not going to be able to accommodate all the learners, we will continue with the rotation system. Parents still release their children to school anyway.
Mr. Mhlanga, if I may come in here, the correspondence that was received and the general understanding is that children can now go back to school. No more of the rotational scheduling. And the reports that we are getting is that there are instances where there are about 40 children in classrooms and parents feeling quite uncomfortable about sending their children into schools. We spoke, for example, on the daytime update a week or so ago to a representative of the teachers union in KwaZulu-Natal, who was saying that they're simply not ready to go back to school. They're simply not ready to allow all the children back at school because they would be packed in classrooms. There are classrooms that house 40 children or more, that there need to be ulterior arrangements made for extra classrooms, and this has actually not been considered by the Department of Basic Education.
That's completely wrong. That's the point that I'm trying to make, that everything that we've been doing this week is under what we call the risk-adjusted, differentiated is the key word, strategy, because the schools are not the same. They're not in the same places. They're not even equal in size. So we said a school will assess its own risk based on the facilities that it has and the space that it has, and then make a decision together with the district and the province on whether in that school all the learners will return or not. Nowhere did the department say all schools must receive all learners at the same time. Nowhere. In fact, I'm surprised that there is that understanding, because it is not what we said.
So what have the schools communicated to you? If you, as a Department of Basic Education, have said to them, we're handing the gauntlet over to you, you know your schools, you know your numbers, tell us how you're going to move forward. Is the department satisfied with the type of communication that you then received from the schools to make sure that the children's safety is guaranteed, or at least as much as you can possibly guarantee it during this time?
Okay, two things. The first one is that the department has said safety first, and we've been saying this right from May, June 2020. We've never changed the approach to everything that we do. That's the first thing. The second thing is that the department said provinces, in fact, provinces in the last meeting last week, all came to report how many schools were going to be able to receive all the learners. And they indicated that certain numbers of schools in the different provinces would not be able to do that. That was based on the communication that came from the schools themselves. What then happened was that come Monday, parents sent their children to school, which then created a problem for the schools. We were there, we saw them. In fact, in the schools that we visited on Monday and Tuesday, I was personally there at 5, 6 a.m. in the different schools on the different days to make sure that we see what happens. What we saw was a large number of learners coming to school, and the school principals were surprised to say, we said to the parents that we are continuing with the rotation, but learners still arrived, which means parents said, go to school. And here is what we think is happening, is that most of the children come from poor households, and them being in school is beneficial because they will be able to access their meals through the school nutrition program, which is an important intervention for those impoverished families. So they think it is better for their children to be in school. So it's not a department that forced learners to come back. We communicated quite clearly many times across many levels in the system, through the SGBs, through the teacher unions. That's why everybody from the SGBs to the teacher unions supported this particular decision to return learners at primary school level where this is possible. It was on that basis.
Mr. Mhlanga, it's quite clear that there's clearly a communication breakdown, a misunderstanding of sorts. So now that the situation is as it is, what should parents do? Should they not be comfortable with their children going to a classroom where there are 40 learners? Can they withdraw their children from their schools? And should that be the decision that they make, how are you going to make sure that their children then do not suffer by being left behind and not being catered for in the curriculum by alternative education and instruction means?
Based on what happened on Monday, we saw schools already on Monday afternoon and Tuesday writing letters to parents to say, please remember that we are still continuing with the rotation. Yes, we appreciate that your child came to school yesterday. We believe that you did not get the message clearly. Please understand that we are continuing with the rotation. So that communication has gone home from school, and we believe that every parent in the affected schools will have received that kind of letter informing them that the rotation continues. In terms of learners being left behind, that is the reality of COVID. People are being left behind in all sorts of ways. we are not able to do the things that we normally do. So that's why we said we cannot have a regulation which says all schools must work at half the capacity, even when there are schools that can accommodate all the learners at the same time and still be able to respect and adhere to the 1 meter distancing that we have been instructed we need to adhere to. So that's the message as it stands right now. The confusion shouldn't be there. If there was miscommunication, we hope that this week would have worked to help parents, schools, SGBs, and teacher unions, and everybody else involved in the sector to help us clarify that message. It's not that all schools are forced, not at all.
Mr. Elijah Mhlanga, if you could please stay with us as we continue focusing on the Department of Basic Education and some of the issues that they are dealing with at this time. Thank you for staying with us. This is News at Prime right here on Newzroom Afrika, channel 405. We are in conversation with the Department of Basic Education spokesperson, Mr. Elijah Mhlanga, regarding the return of pupils back to schools. Mr. Mhlanga says clearly there must have been some sort of miscommunication because they, as a department, did not make it mandatory for all learners, he says, to go back to school and thereby scrapping the rotational schedule. He says that he has given that responsibility to the principals of each school to decide how they want to run it. Mr. Mhlanga, now that we are here, as you've said, parents can then, at their own discretion, choose to withdraw their children from schools. Is that what you're saying?
Well, it shouldn't be parents withdrawing. It should be the school communicating to parents, because when it happens like that, then the parent will know when their children are supposed to come back to school, but they will also know what option the school has chosen. Some schools choose the platooning system, where a group of learners come in at 6:30, 7 in the morning. They go home at 12. Another group comes in from 12:30 or 1 o'clock until late in the afternoon. And other schools choose a daily rotation, others 2 days, others weekly. So you will need to have communicated with the school. And we know that schools did this first themselves because they are the ones that receive the learners. So they choose which approach is preferable to them and what will work for them, because the workload that will be given to the learners for the days that are not in school needs to be managed by both the school together with the parents and guardians. So it is important that whatever parents choose to do, it must be done in consultation with the school.
I've just now, Mr. Mhlanga, gone back to take a look at some of the communication that was issued out. This here is from a media briefing made by Minister Angie Motshekga on the reopening of schools. She says, as a sector, we have held countless consultative sessions to deliberate on the reopening of schools. Depending on confirmation by the President tomorrow after Cabinet, as a sector, there is agreement across the board that we are ready for the reopening of schools on Monday, the 26th of July, 2021. School management teams and support staff have already gone back to work as from Thursday, the 22nd, to prepare for the return of learners and teachers on Monday, the 26th of July. So I don't know where the miscommunication could have come from and where parents have basically lost the communication gap, or where you as government have failed to communicate something that is so important. Like, as we know, every single day being exposed is a day of risk for any individual, even children.
Yeah, I wish you could read that whole speech, because somewhere, I don't know, the written speech actually says schools are reopening on the 26th of July for rotational timetabling to continue. But from the 2nd of August, all learners at primary schools where it is possible will come back to school. So it was a two-step announcement, that one. Remember, the President late in June made an announcement that schools were going to go on an early recess from the 2nd of July as opposed to the 8th of July. So schools went and closed on the 2nd of July, and we therefore had to change the calendar from the initial reopening date of the 19th of July to the 26th. So that media briefing happened on the Saturday to remind parents that as a system, we are ready to receive the learners back on the 26th of July to continue with the rotation. But on the 2nd of August, we then see learners returning to school at full capacity at primary school level where this is possible under the risk-adjusted differentiate strategy.
Mr. Mhlanga, I'd like to move on now to the riots that we saw in KwaZulu-Natal and Gauteng, and there are several schools that were damaged, specifically in KwaZulu-Natal. That obviously means that there's a reduction of available classrooms for learning. What are the measures that the department has put in place to make sure that you are able to accommodate those children who ordinarily would have been able to use those classrooms?
Well, that unrest happened during the recess, so there was no schooling that was disrupted. There was a week to the reopening, a week and a half or so. That gave the KwaZulu-Natal Education Department time to procure mobile classrooms, to make repairs where this was necessary, and all those 137, 139 schools were fully opened and operational by the 26th of July. So there is no school which did not operate, including those 3, by the way, which were completely destroyed. Mobile classrooms were delivered, all the learners were in school. So that unrest, much as it caused damage to the tune of millions, the education program was not disrupted. Learning and teaching continued according to the reopening date of the 26th of July.
As I close off this evening, Mr. Mhlanga, regarding the reduction of the distance between learners to 1.5, or at least that proposal, you say that that will be taken to the unions and cabinet. What are the timelines that you are contemplating? And should the Coronavirus Command Council not perhaps be at the helm of whatever decisions need to be made in that regard?
The Department of Basic Education, together with all stakeholders, has from the start last year followed all the advice from the Ministerial Advisory Committee, the National Coronavirus Command Council, as well as Cabinet. We have not done anything outside the guidance and leadership of those platforms and forums. We stand by that position. Whatever they say, we will follow. All that we do is to make proposals. If those proposals don't succeed, we continue with what we have right now. In terms of timeframes, well, it's not something that is pressing, really, that we want to do tomorrow. It's not like that. It's something that we want South Africans to talk about. With this engagement and the input that people are giving us, it is helping us to compile the formal proposal, because it does not exist as things stand. It is not there at all. That's why we have not spoken to anyone about it formally in the consultation platforms that we have, because it is not there. It's something that is yet to happen. We've got about 10 steps or so in the process of implementing anything that we are thinking about in the basic education sector. And we have not even gone to the first step as yet. So it's a long way off. It's something that is being thought about. Once it has been finalized and packaged, it will then be taken through the normal processes. It will eventually end at the cabinet level where the final decision will be made.
Mr. Elijah Mhlanga, thank you once again for your time this evening. That is